Welcome to the Massachusetts School of Law Educational Forum. Thank you for joining us. This program is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law and is shown nationwide. The topic for today's show, strong women. Was physical strength and is physical strength the path to equality? Query, did being strong really matter for early feminists, and does it matter today? Why are women reluctant to weight train? Do gender differences regarding absolute strength exist? And how does one get stronger? Sheila, what are some of the reasons that you strength train?
My main reason is to stay pain-free. I had a severe back accident about 15 years ago. And with exercise and good diet, but mostly exercise, I have maintained a pain-free existence just by keeping my muscles strong and acting as a natural girdle to my back and just keeping my bones strong and healthy. I find that, generally speaking, I feel better and have been living a pain-free existence.
Welcome. Joining me, Jan Todd, PhD, is a sport historian and author. She is a well-known expert on strength training and teaches in the Department of Kinesiology and Health Education at the University of Texas. Jan's interest in the academic study of strength and exercise grew from her personal involvement in the sport of powerlifting. In addition to holding numerous world records in powerlifting, Jan became the first woman inducted into the Powerlifting Hall of Fame. She is the only woman ever to lift Scotland's famous Dinnie stones. In fact, few men have been able to budge the mighty stones. They weigh 780 pounds. Jan is noted in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first woman in history to lift a combined total of more than 1,000 pounds in 3 classic powerlifting events. Jan, welcome. It is delightful to have you here on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, Jan. Also joining me, Terry Todd, PhD, an Associate Professor of Kinesiology at the University of Texas. Formerly, Terry won the national championship in both weightlifting and powerlifting, setting many national and world best records in the process. He has published 5 books and more than 400 articles and lectures around the nation. He has served as a TV commentator and has appeared many times on television. Terry, thank you also for coming from Texas to join us here today. We are truly honored to have you. Randall Jensen, PhD, an Associate Professor of Exercise Science at Northern Michigan University, where he teaches biomechanics and applied exercise physiology. He is a Fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine and a member of the National Strength and Conditioning Association and the International Society of Biomechanics in Sports. Randy is also a triathlete, and I understand you're doing a triathlon tomorrow with your children?
Yes.
Congratulations. Welcome. Thanks for coming. I am Diane Sullivan, a professor at the Massachusetts School of Law. Jan, let me begin with you. Why did you begin powerlifting?
Well, it's really Terry's fault.
It's always the man's
It
fault.
is.
Right.
And when we started dating and then married, I met Terry after he had retired from his athletic career. He was a national champion in men's powerlifting, held world records. But I was interested in the fact that he continued to go to the gym and believed that the exercise he did was very beneficial to him. And so I started out like a lot of young brides do who want to spend time with their husband. I just tagged along to the gym. Terry had told me there were certain things that I could do that he thought would help. Was worried about my posture a little bit, and so I started doing some exercises for that. But for the most part, the weights were very light, sort of figure work type stuff, and I just found it terribly boring. I mean,
Good for you.
It just wasn't particularly challenging and interesting, and of course, this was back in, it was 1973. And the conditions where we trained were very bad because there was no weight room at the university where I was at the time. And so I think that also was a factor in it. And then what changed things for me was we went home to Austin, Texas to see Terry's parents one year for Christmas. And I met a young woman there who was competing on a men's powerlifting team. And she was,
Good for her.
Yeah, she was very small but very, very strong. And it got me to thinking about why it was that women didn't lift weights and why they didn't train for strength, because clearly this young woman in particular was wonderful looking but also a lot stronger than I was at that point. And so I was sort of intrigued by that.
How do you feel that you benefited from strength training?
Oh gosh, so many ways. Physically, of course, you know, just it makes life a lot easier for you. You can go through your day and not have nearly as much sort of strain on the body. Things that I have a 200-pound Mastiff, and if I need to pick him up and put him in the pickup truck, I could do that. But emotionally, in terms of self-esteem and my feeling of, I guess you might want to say, empowerment, you know, I mean, I just feel like I'm a stronger person. I'm less afraid of life's challenges, I think. It's because I've had this other success, and because I go, I think, through the world with less timidity than I might have in the past.
Great comments. Terry, how have you seen Jan change over the years as a result of weightlifting?
Well, Jan was given a great gift of strength by nature. She's larger than an average woman and has more fast twitch fibers, so that means she's more explosive. She could always run fast, and it was clear that she could become very strong if she wanted to be. When she decided she thought that she might like to try to become stronger, I was interested because really it had been many years since women had really trained hard to try to push their strength in the same way that men were doing. I knew that at the turn of the century, from the 19th into the 20th century, there were quite a number of professional strong women. So we had some role models, but we had to roll the clock way back to reach those role models.
And I do, in a little while, want to go back and revisit some of those early strong women.
Sure. Well, it was in a way a challenge to me to create a training program for Jan that would do what she wanted to do, because I had trained lots of guys, but I had never trained a woman, and so I was anxious to see if what I suspected would work.
So you were not, let me interrupt you and say, you were not fearful that she would get stronger than you. In fact, you encouraged her.
No,
well,
no.
there was never any chance that I would get stronger than Terry.
But quite honestly, I had satisfied myself about my own level of strength and had done what I wanted to do there. And Jan's always been very goal-directed, and I thought that she certainly would bring to the table the sort of regularity in life and this fierceness of purpose that high-level athletics requires. And so we set out on this little journey, and it's been interesting to watch through the years. And I do think that it has made her more confident in other areas of her life, and more willing to say, rather than, well, I'm not sure I can do that, just to say, well, where do I start?
Yeah. You have written, or at least talked about, the transformation that all people feel when they strength train.
Yes, it's the thing about strength training that's different from other kinds of sports. Running shares this, but you have an easy way to determine how you're doing. You can see the efficacy of hard work show up in the gymnasium, because when you go in and you've been training hard, you're stronger. There are more weights on the bar, or you can lift the same weight for more repetitions. You can see physical changes in your body more dramatically than you would see as a result of doing any other activity. Weight training is most dramatic in terms of its ability to show you the results of your work. And so for both men and women, this is a great, what the behaviorists would call positive reinforcement.
Sure it is. Randy, you have 2 children, as I understand, a daughter and a son.
Yes.
You'd have them train equally for triathlons? Your daughter the same as your son?
Oh yes, my daughter trains just as hard as my son does. She prefers the swimming aspect quite a bit, and in fact that's her favorite sport. And she also trains with dryland training, doing strength training and so forth to prepare for swimming, and in season does it also.
That's terrific. It tells me there's a different world today for young girls, and that's great. Jan, I want to come back to you and ask you, would it be accurate to say that for more than a century, women have lifted weights to gain muscle as well as confidence?
Absolutely. I think that we've had eras when there was more of it going on, but as Terry alluded to just a second ago, at the turn, starting in about 1890, there was an era of professional strong women who appeared in the circuses and in vaudeville and in some of the music halls. And many of those women were honored as wonderful athletes. I mean, there was a strong woman named Minerva who performed throughout North America, down into Mexico, over in Europe. And she was honored by Richard K. Fox, who was the editor of the Police Gazette at the time, also was a big promoter of John L. Sullivan. Minerva lifted right around 3,000 pounds on her back in an exhibition in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1895. And there were other women like Katie Sanduina. Sanduina was the centering attraction with the Ringling Brothers Circus in 1911, 1912, 1913. And as part of her act, it was really kind of wonderful. She was married to a man who was quite a bit smaller than she was, because she was about 6 feet tall. And her husband was about 150, 60 pounds. And so she could take him and do the manual arms with him as if he were a rifle and sort of swing him around in different ways. And she could put a 600-pound cannon on her back and walk across the center ring of the circus. And she performed well up into the 1940s. So there were women who had figured out, for one thing, that strength would give them an income, and a good income. And many of the strong women had children and daughters who then followed them into the theaters and into the circus ring. So there was that group of women. But there were other women back at the turn of the century as well who just trained. In some cases even trained to increase their proficiency at, say, track and field and swimming. There was a magazine that was published at the turn of the century called Physical Culture that was edited by Bernard McFadden. And he was sort of the Joe Weider of the last turn of the century, last century turn. And McFadden's magazines are filled with stories of girls who are doing some dumbbell work to be a better diver, or doing this so they can run a little faster. And so, but then it died. It passed away. And by the time the 30s come, things waned until you get around World War II. And then during World War II, when women went back to work, there was a movement again for weight training among women. And in fact, there were a group of women in Southern California at what we call Muscle Beach who became very famous throughout the world for their lifting. And many of them were featured in newsreels, in Look magazine, Life magazines, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I recall that. I think we can all understand, our viewers especially, that if you lift weights, you're going to gain physical strength. That's for sure. Your body's going to be transformed. But why does weightlifting help gain confidence?
I think part of it is because it's a sense of accomplishment, that it's something that you can do. I think the example of Jan having goals to say, well, I want to be able to do this and to be able to accomplish something. I think that's probably a big point.
But I think the other thing for women is that if you think about how we were raised, our generation of women, Diane, I was never in my life encouraged by a physical education teacher or a family member until I met Terry to think at all about strength as an aspect of womanhood.
Oh, absolutely
and
not right.
And there is no reason, there's no reason why strength is gender specific. The muscles, as Randy can tell us, it's really his field, not mine, but muscle is muscle. There are many animals in which the female is the more powerful, the better huntress, but we somehow in our culture have equated strength strictly with masculinity. And
why is that?
Well, I think partly it's bad science. In the old days we used to think, well, you had to have testosterone, and the more testosterone you had, you were going to be stronger. Well, testosterone's part of the story, but as Randy can tell you, it's not the whole story in terms of strength. There's other factors that matter. But it's more a matter of size. Men have more muscle because they're just bigger than we are. But pound for pound, if you actually look at the research literature, women are in their lower bodies pretty much at the same strength level as men are. But
well, let's go to that. Randy, pound for pound, is a man and woman equal in strength?
If you look at it pound for pound, it's very, very, very close. And in fact, in some areas of the body, particularly in the legs, for example, women may be stronger than men if you look at it on a pound per pound basis. In the upper body, that doesn't seem to be the case as much. And part of it might be because of also the size aspect and how the muscles are attached and so forth. There may be some slight differences as far as that's concerned. But definitely in the lower body, and if you look at muscle, if you look at muscle equated on a square area, area of square muscle mass, it's the same. The two equate and line up almost exactly on a regression line.
And I think one of the things that's happened is, too, that I think 50 years from now, people having this conversation are going to have a very different conversation because women now are training. We've been judging our you look at our history, we're judging differences in strength primarily on the fact that we have men who do physical labor and have done sports and exercise, especially upper body things where you throw and climb.
Yeah.
And women haven't. I mean, that hasn't been what we've been socialized to do. And that makes a lot of difference.
Sure it does.
But
Terry,
if I can just
Sure.
jump in, one of the things though that does contribute to the difference and will continue to contribute to it is that whereas it's certainly true that an individual equal amount of male muscle and female muscle will perform more or less the same way, but with 10 times more circulating testosterone in an average male body than in an average female body, the male can build muscle more easily, can create strength more easily, can build strength more easily than a woman can. Because of that, I mean, all other things being equal, which they're not, but assuming that they were, then still that would be a very significant advantage to men in terms of creating strength. And to further elaborate on what Randy said, the superstructure of the male upper body is really a lot bigger than I mean, the bones are much thicker, shoulders are wider, and so it's like having a bigger framework for a house. You can make a bigger house if the framework is larger.
oh, I think that's quite right. I know for myself, who's a recreational
Right.
weightlifter, if you will, I'm as strong as nearly every man in the gym from my waist down. But as hard as I work my upper body, I'm just not as strong. That's
Right.
the bottom line. I'm still going to try to get
Right.
there, but I'm not as strong.
Right. See, Jan trained as hard as, and I'm not exaggerating, as hard as anyone I ever saw train. She really, really trained with almost frightening commitment and regularity and intensity. And she never got her bench press very much over 200 pounds. Now that's a lot for a woman, of course, but I mean, for a man, it is not.
Yeah.
But yet, in her lower body, she was able to squat, do a full knee bend with 550 pounds on her shoulder, which only a handful of football players at major colleges now can do. And so some of this has to do with the difference in upper body structure and the fact that she never took anabolic steroids, which seem to affect the upper
Right.
body more than they do the lower body.
Well, is this true? I've always heard, and this is my guiding principle, that a woman's goal should be to bench press half of her body weight. A man, you know, for fitness we're talking, a man should be able to lift his body weight. I say, no way, there's not going to be a difference. I'm going to lift my weight, and I'm 5 pounds off of that.
Right.
But on my legs I can lift, 7 times my weight.
Sure.
So would you say, for the average woman in the audience that's training, a goal should be to lift half her body weight to bench press?
Well, it depends so much on how large the person is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ant and the elephant story. Obviously, Jan could outlift all of the women of her era, but she was not outlifting the small ones pound for pound.
Mm-hmm.
And so, who's stronger? So, in other words, you have to be careful how you create goals so you don't set yourself up for disappointment. But I think the main thing, rather than being particularly concerned about a specific goal, it's maybe wiser to think in terms of goals that represent an area that you reach that's just a little bit ahead of where you are now. And then you just use that as a stairway to the future.
Randy, let me ask you a question, something I know women worry about. Women believe if they lift weights, when they weigh in the morning, the pounds are going to be greater. They're going to gain weight from weightlifting. That isn't true, is it?
Well, probably the best example I can give on that is looking at when my wife started lifting weights. And one of the things she was interested in...
She's not here to defend herself,
no,
Randy.
But that's one of the things that happened is she was concerned that she was not losing any weight. She said, I'm doing all this extra exercise and I'm not losing any weight. And I said, honey, look at your jeans though. They're looser. I said, yes, you may not be losing weight, but you are losing fat and you're gaining the muscle mass. And the two essentially are washing each other out.
But the lawyer that I am, I love facts. And what I read in preparing for this show is a woman who begins to weight train, let's say she lifts 2 to 3 times a week, she will gain 1 3/4 pounds of muscle. I mean, I'm sure this is roughly, but she'll gain 1 3/4 pounds of muscle, yet she's going to lose 3 to 5 pounds of fat. So why doesn't she see a decrease in the pounds on the scale?
Decrease as the pounds on the scale? Well, I think you may see a slight amount, but even if you look at it from 1 3/4 pounds and 3 pounds, well, that's only a pound difference, or 2 or 3 pounds. It's a very small amount. Plus, we all have daily fluctuations that are moving up and down, and I think probably women even more so with changes through the menstrual cycle. And I think those are all things that are going to affect it to a certain degree.
And the other thing you have to remember too is when you begin an exercise program, most of us tend to be a little hungrier.
Yeah.
And so there's also that factor to consider. You might be losing fat, but you're still maybe eating just, so you're not going to have a big loss. I mean, in my own case, one of the things that I did with my lifting career that was kind of interesting to me was I actually weight trained and gained weight on purpose, and then lifted for a while weighing as much as 225, 230 pounds as a heavyweight. And then I went, while lifting, all the way down to the 148-pound class, competed at the 148-pound class, broke world records at 148, and trained throughout that whole process too. So, I mean, it can be done, but it just takes a certain amount of discipline.
Oh, sure.
And for most recreational trainers or people, many women now are more concerned about the osteoporosis issues, and so they're in the gym for those kinds of concerns rather than doing what I was doing, which was trying to be the strongest woman ever. That was sort of my goal. And so, you want to have a regular life that's a happy life that satisfies you, and so they don't want to make those huge sacrifices. We have the same discussion at the University of Texas with our weight training students in the kinesiology program all the time. I'm getting smaller, I'm getting leaner, but I'm not really losing weight. And I try to explain to them, well, you need to start looking at the other factors, because any exercise scientist, as Randy will tell you, you can't just do the one thing and expect to see big changes in body composition. It needs to be a programmatic, a lifestyle change that you want people to undertake.
Well, Diane, I think it's really cultural too.
Yeah.
It's so important that women disabuse themselves of this notion that they have to weigh a certain amount.
Oh, you're right,
for them to be acceptable to themselves and to others. I mean, that's hogwash, and it's been hogwash forever, and it will remain hogwash. You need to be concerned with how you feel and how you can perform. That's the main thing. I mean, one of the, I hate to brag on Jen, but the fact that she was willing to gain weight. I mean, no one thinks anything. A guy wants to go out for a football team or throw the shot or whatever, and he trains with weights and eats a lot, he gains. Everybody's, hey, you're looking good, you're getting bigger, this is great. But for a woman to do what Jen did was unheard of. It was revolutionary. It was strange, and yet it was not something I urged her to do. She just realized that she was able to lift more weights when she was heavier.
Oh, absolutely,
And also, she was facing at that time opposition from other women who were coming into the sport of powerlifting and using anabolic steroids, which gave them a huge advantage over her. And so it was a way to fight the drugstore with the food store. But she was willing to do that, knowing that she could lose the weight and put herself back down when she wanted to. But women really should just forget about that. Train, exercise, eat correctly, get some rest, and let your body weigh what it wants to weigh. There are plenty of people who will give you all the approbation anyone needs.
Great comments, Terry. Randy, I read that unless a woman starts to weight train by the age of 40, and Jen, I think you even wrote about this, that woman will start to lose her muscle. And in fact, at the age of 40 and over, she's going to lose, and the numbers vary, but at least 1/3 pound of muscle every year, and some statistics are higher. And that's going to be replaced with fat. So I guess my question is, to halt the aging process, is the answer weightlifting?
Well, I think it's one of the answers. And the reason I say it's one of the answers is that it helps to increase or maintain, even if not an increase, but to at least maintain muscle mass. And I guess I shouldn't even back off on the gains. You can see the gains after also. There have been some studies that have been shown, even with individuals later in life, that have shown some gains. They may not be huge gains. Obviously, we're going to see our greatest gains when we're younger, but even seeing gains that might take place in the 60s and 70s. They are not, again, going to be huge gains, but you'll see some at that point. And I think that in that aspect, it's imperative for women to do strength training, probably men too, but I think it is probably for all of us as we continue to age.
I have a PhD student right now at the University of Texas who's working with a geriatric population, and his name's Larry Henry, and Larry's interest is in the fact that so many people are put in rest homes not because of any other factor than that they are not physically strong enough to go through daily life. For instance, there are people who become so, their hand strength becomes so poor that they can't even handle doorknobs anymore. They still have their mental faculties, but just the little things are the problems. And that's why it's really important for older adults, I believe, to try to do something with some resistance exercise just to make life easier. Just like when I tell my women in my classes, I said, you know, those children you're going to have in the next 5 years are not going to get lighter as they grow. You know, those bags of groceries don't get lighter as we get older. And for so many women, we just sort of, we hit this peak at 2025, and then we just quit doing exercise, and we don't think about the really valuable benefits that can be had from just having a modicum more of strength.
What made me want to do this show, Jan, was, quite frankly, your statements in an article where you talk about your friends, women in their 40s, pushing themselves away from life.
Yeah.
I'm 40 now, I've got to stop living it. And I really think, and you really made me think, that part of the problem with aging is that we give into it.
We just quit. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, it's just, well, I do know why. We get busy, you know, and we use our busyness as an excuse. And I find myself, even myself, saying some days, oh, where's, you know, how do I get to the gym? Where's the time to do this? You know, you've got this report and that report and this student who needs to see you, and so it is tough. But for women in particular, I think I think men have been better in the last 20 years about not giving in to aging in the same way that women have. And I think part of me wants to think that it's some of what Terry was referring to, that I think we become a little bit more self-conscious about our appearance, say in a pair of shorts or in clothes that you would wear at the gymnasium, and so we don't want to put on the bathing suit and get in the pool and do the laps. You know, these kinds of things I think begin to affect women more as they age than they do men. But I think the other thing is that it's, again, for our generation, there's this socialization that went on in my life as a young woman growing up that didn't encourage me to think about physical activity as being a regular part of my life.
Yeah, women for some reason do not demand of themselves to be physically strong, and they believe that the ideal woman is thin, frail, and so forth. And I think that's something we, as Terry said, we've got to dispel of. Yeah. Do many women today engage in strength training? You talk about your daughter, Randy, is doing it at 12. How wonderful.
I think it's becoming more accepted.
Oh,
my daughter can't fathom the idea that her mother had to compete on the boys' ski team when she was in high school. She just can't believe that.
Yeah.
And my daughter accepts that. Caitlin says, that's what I'm going to do. Nolan does it, I'm going to do it. My other friends are doing it on the swim team, I'm going to do it also. I think it's much more accepted there. It's working its way up, I think, with the help of Title IX. I see it from my students, college-age students, that they accept it. And if you look around and look in the gym, there are virtually as many women as there are men at our school anyway.
Yeah, there are many millions. The numbers vary depending on the study you see and exactly what's meant, whether they're talking about people at home training, but there are probably at least 25 or 30 million women in the U.S. training with doing strength training. And this is really a sea change. And, but it's very important, and we noticed at the University of Texas, we've been back there for 18 years now, and we have noticed that the classes in weight training were, at the beginning of our time there, they were almost completely male. Now they are approximately 50-50.
Wow.
And this seems like a wonderful change, a wonderful shift, and I think it represents something significant in the culture. And but these kinds of changes often happen slowly, but the fact that they're happening at all, I do think is related a lot to Title IX, and thank God for that.
But the other big difference is that the generation of women your daughter's age and the ages of my university students have an acceptance of muscle that older women don't have. I mean, if you, Esquire magazine this month has a big article on the beauty of women athletes, who are the sexiest women athletes. And if you look at even at some women movie stars now, having a little bit of muscle, a little deltoid definition, a little bit of a bicep, we see more muscle now on women role models than we used to see. And that's really positive. Even the success of the women's soccer team when they won the big championships, you know, and she takes her shirt off, you can see the abs, I mean, and but yet she's still a big hero. The younger women have an appreciation of that, which I think still somewhat bothers, say, women of my generation.
Do the younger men have an acceptance of their girlfriends and their wives having that muscle?
Absolutely. You know, if you talk to college students, it's toning. You know, they want to see a little toning. You know, it's not about big bosoms in quite the same way that it used to be.
That's good news. We need to take a break, but before we do, I want you to consider over this break time the following, whether it's fact or whether it's fiction. First, that women will become too muscular and will look masculine if they lift weights. Is that fact or fiction? That women cannot develop strength. Fact or fiction? Women are too frail to lift weights. Fact or fiction? And women will gain extra pounds by lifting weights. Fact or fiction? Think about this. Please watch our break, and when we come back, come with me to the gym and an interview with Kelly. Thanks. Stay tuned.
Hey, Brianna, what was that math assignment? Hello?
Hi, honey. What are you doing?
Doing homework with my friends. Aren't I supposed to?
Just called to say hi, that's all.
Hi? That's all?
Yep.
Dad, that's so cool.
But hey, coolness runs in our family.
Well, I was thinking that I need my allowance a little early.
What a coincidence. I need someone to clean the garage for me.
Really?
Family.
I'll see you tonight, Dad.
Isn't it about
All right.
time?
I love you.
I love you too, Dad.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Before you know it, she talks. Before you know it, she walks. Before you know it, she knows you. Before you know it, she has a heart. Before you know you're pregnant, when your baby's no bigger than a grain of rice, before she's a twinkle in your eye, that's when you need to take folic acid every day. After that, it's too late to prevent some serious birth defects. Folic acid now, before you know it.
Kids aren't afraid of other kids, or people with different colored skin. That's because kids know there are other things, worse things, bigger things to be afraid of. Like monsters from outer space! Remember, friends come in all colors.
Kelly, tell us about your weightlifting program.
Okay, I work out 5 to 6 times a week, usually opposing muscle groups I'll do. Like Monday I'll do a chest and back, where I'll do, biceps and tris the next day.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it probably about 6 years. Started a little before high school and kept it up since then.
Why do you weight train?
Primarily for strength. I like to feel healthy and strong. Second reason would be stress reduction. I think it's a good way to release stress throughout the day.
Do you have any special tips for our audience?
Frequency. You need to get in the club, 4 to 5 times a week. Otherwise, you're not going to see benefits, and you're certainly not going to reap the benefits just coming, twice a week.
Last question I have for you is, how do you fit it into your otherwise very busy schedule?
You have to fit it in. It's the top of my list. It's the first thing I think about, throughout the week. It has to be in my schedule. Otherwise, I'm not productive with anything else.
Welcome back to the Educational Forum. Before we left for break, I left our audience with a couple questions I'd like our expert panel to answer. Fact or fiction? Women become too muscular and they'll look masculine if they lift weights.
Fiction.
Fiction.
Fiction, then that's my final answer.
Women cannot develop strength. Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Fiction.
Definitely.
Fiction. Women are too frail to lift weights. This better be fiction.
I think if they don't do anything, they will be frail. Once they start to lift, they'll build.
And lastly, women will gain weights. They'll gain weight on the scale if they lift weights.
It's possible. You need to be very careful and eat a good, healthy diet when you do train. You should, as was mentioned earlier, when you gain a bit of lean muscle mass, you should also be losing fat. So it should be more or less a wash, as Randy said. But everything is very individual. Some women gain more muscle more easily, but they generally, these same women, lose fat more easily also. Some men can walk through the gym and look at a dumbbell and their arms will get bigger and stronger. And others have to train and train. So all this is very individual. But it would be false to say that women cannot build muscle when they train with weights. They can indeed. The fact of the matter is, however, it's muscle that enables us to move in space and do well in sports and be healthy and burn fat. And so it's what moves us through the world. It's important, and we shouldn't shun it. We should celebrate it.
Great comment. Jan, let's revisit history for another moment. Our foremothers, going back to the people that were instrumental in the right to vote, would it be accurate to say that these people, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, believed that physical strength was necessary so you would not be perceived as a woman that could be dominated?
One of my research interests has been the history of women's exercise. And when I was looking at the 19th century in particular, because I am a feminist and I'm very sensitive to those sorts of issues, I was amazed at how often references to strength and the lack of physical strength in women was referred to by some of these early women suffragists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and some of the other pioneers for women's rights as one of the real reasons for women's lowered status in the culture. And it struck me very hard when I found that information, began to see those references, because it made me begin to think, of course, about my own experiences and how I had found the physical strength that I built to be liberating in so many ways in terms of even my intellectual life. I mean, I went through my PhD program with a lot more confidence than I had, I think, because of my weightlifting. So yeah, that is there, and in fact that's one of the things that I explore in my book that I wrote called Physical Culture and the Body Beautiful.
Which is a wonderful book, and I really think you're the only person that's really written on this.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that very much. I think that I think when we think about the 19th century, most of my early training in physical education history was all about women just didn't do very much. But actually in the 19th century, there was quite a bit of interest in strength. And there was even a movement in the 1850s and 60s for women to lift heavy weights. There was a man named George Barker Winship who advocated what he called the health lift, where he wanted people to lift heavy weights, but only for very, very short distances. And again, it was for men and women, but the idea was that you need enough resistance and enough stress to really to really stress your physiology. And I think one of the things we haven't really talked about here at the show at all today is the question of loading. And I think one reason so many women don't see the benefits they want with resistance exercise is because they don't use enough weight to actually see physiological change, and even to become as interested in it. Because I know for my own case, again, for me it was when I began to measure things and plan things in my workouts and not just go in and do light stuff that I began to feel better about the training that I was doing.
Well, even just recently in the gym this week, you hear women, they don't want the extra weights because they're so concerned that they're going to gain muscle. And where is that fear rooted in? In my opinion, that the men they're with don't want them to have muscle. Now, why that is, I don't know.
But that's changing.
Okay.
That's changing.
That's good news.
Yes, I think it's changing. I don't think it's certainly changed as much as I would like to see it change, as I think it will change. But we're moving in that direction. Even the bodies of men and what's acceptable now in men in films. Believe me, if you were to go back and take a look at the heroes of male pinup type, hunks from, say, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, go back and look at the movies and see people with their shirts off and see how they look. Most of these people, believe me, wouldn't be allowed to take their shirt off now in a film. They really wouldn't, because they don't look well enough. They look too soft or too small. They don't have that hard, tight look that's almost required of someone who's a romantic lead now. Now that's a big cultural change.
Also, something that you chatted with me about earlier is the difference even using weight training as a part of becoming an athlete or a top-notch athletic professional. Look at the golf.
Yes. I was reading the other day, and I'd had some conversations with people who are involved in his training, and Tiger Woods can bench press over 300 pounds. Now he's a very lean athlete. You know, he's tall, broad-shouldered, but very lanky and lean. Nonetheless, the strength to bench press over 300 pounds, that's a high level of strength for someone who is, you know, training just as an adjunct to his sport. But it was not very many years ago. Some contemporaries of mine would say it is a long time ago, but when I was an athlete at the University of Texas, I had a scholarship in tennis, and all of the athletes at that time were, in all sports, were essentially forbidden to lift weights. Not only was it not recommended, it was forbidden. Now, of course, it's absolutely required of all athletes. And so what could be a bigger change than that?
Are men generally intimidated, I'm talking about men in their 30s, 40s, 50s today, by gals who weight train?
I think that it would be safe to say that some are, but I think many are not, particularly ones are not who are doing the lifting. Mm-hmm. Because you see, they understand this is just someone else coming in, wanting to have some physical improvement, wanting to get some exercise, and they are accepted as sort of part of the gang, you know, and that's how it was with Jan in the early days. Mm-hmm. And she was the only one in some of the gyms where we trained. And maybe I provided a buffer for her, because people knew who I was, mm-hmm. and I was stronger than everybody in the gym, and so even after I retired, and so maybe they wouldn't have said anything just because of that. But very quickly, Jan won her place because they saw how hard she trained. And women will find acceptance if they just go in and get right to it, do the exercise.
You know what I find? I'll walk up to a machine, and if it's a new guy in the gym, he'll look at me and say to me, how many plates you want me to take off? And I don't care, whatever he's lifting, I'm going to say add 3, okay, just to spite him. So I wonder, hopefully someday that will all change. Randy, you've been kind of quiet on this issue, so let me ask you this question. Why do you believe our culture, or men in general, promote the small, frail body as the ideal?
I think probably a large portion of that is that it's been socially acceptable that way, and I think it has been for a long time. I think as it's changing, as both Jan and Terry mentioned earlier, with the students that we're seeing now and the students that I have at the university right now, it isn't that way so much anymore. Now, it may be more for people mine and Terry's age, but for guys our age, but even that I think is changing to a certain degree, and I think some of it is changing depending upon what they see. And I think that you'll see differences continue to happen as we move along.
Let me ask the panel this question. What combination of weight work and maybe even cardiovascular work will produce the best results?
Well, the best results is sort of a loaded question, because what is the result that you want? I mean, if you just want general fitness for somebody who's a young person, say 20 to 30 years old, or are we talking about best results for a woman who may be 50 years old and is primarily concerned at this point with just a modicum of strength and her osteoporosis, or the potential for osteoporosis? So I think one thing we need to be real clear about is I mean, for me in particular, you always need to know what is the person's objective in the kind of training that they're doing. I personally think that for people who are training just for fitness, who aren't necessarily concerned with being, you know, with getting rid of all their body fat or making those kinds of dramatic changes, but just want to go through life with more health and vigor and strength, that if you could hit the gym just even 2 days a week and do a weight training program 2 days a week and spend, say, 3 to 4 other days of the week doing something cardiovascular, you would make terrific changes. You'd be in much better shape in terms of your overall health. You would see positive changes in your body composition, maybe not quite as quickly as, say, the young woman on the tape was talking about, but you have to. But the other trick to all this is to find a program that you can live with and do it. And, you know, I can't be in the gym 6 days a week now. When I was competing, I used to train 6 days a week, but I would not train 6 days a week now, and I wouldn't recommend that for anybody who's out in the world as a person, because I just don't think you can get there. Most of us don't have that kind of time. But with 2 days a week of training, you can still get stronger and still build muscle and have physiological changes.
And prevent bone deterioration.
And absolutely prevent bone deterioration. And that's not that much time.
My final question, what age am I going to max out? If I want to still get stronger, what age am I going to max out?
That'll depend, I think, to a certain degree on where you're starting out at. And it's, I think Terry mentioned a few times earlier that it's very much an individual thing. We're going to see something that might be one area for you, might be totally different than it is for Jan.
But I can continue to get stronger as I age.
I would say it's going to depend mainly on where you start out at. And if you start training later, you're going to still have that possibility to max out. And it will, I think the max will change as you age to a certain degree too, but you can still attain values that you may have had when you were much, much younger.
Before we close this segment of the show, I'd like to review the benefits of strength training. And let's put them up on the screen for our viewers to see. As I see it, the benefits of strength training are prevention of bone loss or even adding bone density. Strength training reduces depression, it reduces anxiety, it increases self-esteem, it builds emotional resilience, it reduces heart rate, and it improves physical and mental health. A lot of benefits from strength training as I see it. You agree, panel?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the final segment of the show, we are going to go out to the gym to a custom designed training program just for our viewers. So I want to thank you for joining us on this segment of the show, and stay tuned for the how-to section of this program. Thanks a lot to our panel. Thanks so much for joining me today. Stay tuned. So you've decided you'd like to get stronger, or you realize that you should get stronger. Well, that's good. But how do you start? Do you feel intimidated? Well, here's some advice from Scott and Bethany of Orchard Hills Athletic Club on how to get started. They have developed a strength program just for you. One you can do in the privacy of your home or with a set of dumbbells in your local gym.
Thanks, Diane. What Bethany and I had put together for people at home is a simple workout program that works your total body that you can do either at a gym or in the comfort of your own home. The first exercise we're going to perform is the dumbbell squat. And if you don't have weights and you're going to be getting them, you can always use a pair of soup cans or something with weight that you can hold on.
Squats can even be done without any weight at all. The most important thing that you're looking for is form. The idea is that you want to stand about shoulder width apart, weight in your heels, arms by your side.
And begin.
The idea is that you want to sit in a chair, head and chest up, inhale and exhale.
And you always want to keep a nice arch in your back and your chin straight forward. If you have a mirror, that's a great tool you can use to looking forward and keeping your spine in alignment. And you just want to go down to a 90-degree bend, never leaving your heels. Another exercise for legs that's great is
a lunge.
A lunge. And you can do this without weight first if you're a beginner, because lunges require a lot of balance and stability. So the first way to perform a lunge is
standing shoulder width apart, take a step back or forward. Again, keeping proper alignment of the body, keeping knee over ankle, head and chest are up. You're going straight down and straight up. Think of it like a carousel horse. Straight down, straight up. I keep my legs about shoulder width apart because that helps my balance. If my legs were directly one behind the other, I'd be more inclined to lean one way or the other. So straight down and straight up. And again, once you've completed a set of 10 or 12 repetitions, whatever feels comfortable, you'd, again, switch legs and down and up.
Now, for upper body, of course, you have your chest, back, and arms and shoulders. We're going to start with simple chest exercise. And the first basic one is the push-up that everybody knows and not all of us like to do.
Push-ups can be done on your toes or on your knees if that feels more comfortable. Getting down on the floor. Hands about shoulder width, a little bit beyond shoulder width apart. up, abdominals nice and tight, back flat, keeping your rear end down, coming down and up, down and up. On your knees, down and up. This builds great strength in your shoulders, your chest, your upper back, little biceps, triceps.
So now we've done exercises for your legs, your hamstrings, your calves, your glutes, and your chest area. So now we're going to move on to your back. And Bethany here is going to perform a bent over lateral raise. And again, you can perform this at home with soup cans, or you can use dumbbells at a gym. And what I like about this exercise for women is because women have a lot of problems with their posture. A lot of people like to hunch over, and they develop a hunch as they get older in life. And this exercise is great for strengthening the rear shoulders and your trapezius muscles in the top of your back area, so it helps keep them in a good alignment.
Now here I'm only using 10-pound weights.
And with this exercise here, again, she's using the mirror to look forward to keep her chin in alignment, and she has a good straight back. And as with all exercises, you want to have your back straight. Posture is very important.
Think of your back as like a ski slope. Nice and straight, slightly bent. Squeeze. Now my thing is too, I'm really trying to squeeze my shoulder blades together. Imagine if your shoulder blades could kiss each other, that's what they're doing.
Now we're going to move on to doing some shoulder exercises, a front raise and a lateral raise. And the reason why we put these two together is because you're using weights, it's an anaerobic exercise, but then when you combine two exercises, it becomes more aerobic and it keeps your heart rate up. So you may build up a little bit more of a sweat with this, and it's nice to vary your routine around a little bit here and there.
A standard frontal raise is done by lifting your weights straight out in front of you and down. Now if you notice, I'm only coming up as high as mid-chest and down. I don't want to come up as high as my eyeballs and not coming up here. That's not as effective. By coming to mid-chest, I'm giving my shoulder a full range of motion. When I come up any higher than that, I start to impinge the muscles in my shoulder, the nerves, and that can cause to future problems. That's your frontal raise. A lateral raise, arms out to the side and down. And again, I'm only coming up shoulder, mid-chest height, and down. Now what Scott was talking about, the combination, is a frontal raise, lateral raise combination.
Now we're going to perform an exercise for the tricep muscle, which is the area on the back of your arm. And the dumbbell kickback, which Bethany is going to perform, is a great exercise to use all three heads of the tricep muscle that works it. And you can, again, you can do this at home or in a gym.
Right. The idea is if you have a chair at home or some type of a flat surface below a small table, bend over, back flat. And again, I'm looking in the mirror here at the gym. If you have a mirror at home, that's a really good idea. Elbow bent up, arm tight close to your side. And notice the weight is right in my hip area. I kick back, squeezing the tricep, coming down again, back to the hip level. Squeeze back and down, back and down.
Now we're going to move on to the bicep area, which is the front muscle on your arm. And Bethany is going to perform the most basic exercise for your arms, and that is the dumbbell curls. Now, there's a few different variations you can do with this, and what she's doing here is keeping her hands pronated throughout the whole movement.
Pronated means up, for those of you that are not familiar with that term. Bicep curls, you can do them both together, or again, you can single them out one at a time. That just makes it a little more concentrated. You can be a little more focused, or again, you can do both of them together.
Last but not least, we're going to finish off the workout with the abdominals. And Bethany here is going to perform the basic abdominal crunch.
When you're doing a crunch, think of your head as a natural extension of the body. When you put your hands behind your head, a crunch can be done with your hands behind your head. That's the most natural place for them. Think that you've got like an apple and orange stuck between your chin and your chest. That way you're not pulling your chin forward and that you're not putting any stress on the back of your neck. The idea is when you crunch up, that you get your shoulder blades completely off of the floor. So you crunch up, get them off the floor, and come back down. Up, crunch,
and down.
And when performing this, you want to keep your lower back pressed against the floor at all times. You don't want your back to leave it, any part of your back. You want your lower back pressed against the floor, and you want to breathe out hard when you come up and do the work. And there are different variations for your hand positions when doing a crunch. You can cross your chest, and you can have them back behind your head like she had. You can reach out in front of you.
You can have them over your head.
That's a little bit for the advanced.
That's a little more advanced, yep. Most people, that's your crunch right there.
And with the other body part exercises, you want to do 3 sets of maybe 12 to 15 repetitions. And for legs, you can move it up to 4 sets of 12 to 15 repetitions because legs is the largest muscle group in your body. So they may require a little bit more work and a little bit more stimulation.
Dad, where are you going?
I'm gonna play a little golf.
Why?
Because it's Saturday, and that's the day that Dad plays golf.
Why?
Because I really like golf.
But why?
Well, good question. Because most of the time I just spend the day chasing a little white ball around the course.
Why?
Well, usually it's because I hit the ball into the rough or out of bounds.
Why?
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder why I even took up this game. Maybe I'll cut back a little.
Why?
Well, for starters, maybe I could spend a few more Saturdays doing something with you.
Hey, Dad.
Huh?
When?
Family. Isn't it about time? From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
What inspired David to spend a lifetime exploring distant planets?
Star Trek.
What inspired Nicole to bring new life into the world?
The first time I saw St. Elsewhere.
And what inspired Stephen to risk his life for others?
Hill Street Blues.
Television. Who will it inspire next?
You know how inquisitive kids are. That's why you store sharp objects in a safe place. Keep medicines out of reach. And if you have a gun, you keep it unloaded and locked away. As concerned members of the television community, we urge you to be just as careful with television. Kids don't always know what they're watching. That's why you should.